the world was falling apart. Fascist Nazi shock troops of the Third Reich and their blitzkrieg had spread across Europe and northern Africa, and were marching their eastern front deep into the heart of Russia. The Empire of Japan was making its conquest of the Pacific reality. 65 million human lives would be lost. 11 million would eventually be systematically exterminated by an evil war machine like the world had never seen before. To gain a foothold into Europe and take on the armies of Hitler's Nazi Third Reich, the world needed a new elite type of soldier. The paratrooper was that soldier. Changing Hearts and Minds welcomes you to a special series dedicated to the greatest generation, and specifically the well-known story that inspired the best-selling book and HBO Mini-series, Band of Brothers. Join me, Jeff Adamick, veteran of the U.S. Army where I served as a paratrooper in the 82nd, Ranger in the 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, and finally as a Green Beret in 3rd Special Forces Group, as I welcome fellow veterans, other podcast hosts and personalities, and some very special guests to honor the true story, book, and television series about the greatest generation's most honored story of sacrifice, service, and leadership in the face of overwhelming evil. Lessons in Leadership, the men and history of Easy Company. Here's what happened last episode on Band of Brothers. After relaxing on leave in England, Easy Company returns to combat with several new replacements, and along with veteran soldiers to take part in Operation Market Garden. After an uneventful jump into Holland and exposure to the Dutch taking their frustrations out on the Nazi sympathizers, Easy Company moves to take the town and is heavily overmatched by German armor. During the counterattack, they have to pull back. This leads to the separation of Sergeant Bull Randleman from the main element, and the body of Easy Company retreats back without him, having to leave him there thinking that he was dead. Bull Randleman spends the night eluding German discovery, and an impromptu rescue mission by his own replacement soldiers is begun, leading to the recovery of Sergeant Randleman. And we learn later in the post-credit or the post-episode credit script that Operation Market Garden was considered a tactical failure. So that was last episode, and that was the episode that we had with Change Your POV co-host and founder Eddie Lazary.
If you're a leader, you lead the way. Not just on the easy ones, you take the tough ones too.
A good leader has to understand the people that are under him, understand their needs, their desires, or how they think a little bit.
Seemed like he always made the right decisions along the way. He was a real soldier. Like some of the officers, I don't think I would follow them in the water. But he was one of the best.
He went right in there and he never thought of not being first or sending somebody in his place. I don't know how he survived. But he did.
This episode, we are going to be talking about the episode called Crossroads, which is episode 5 of Band of Brothers. And our guest co-host for this one is another Change Your POV co-host, Bennett Tanton, who also happens to be the co-host of Cigars and Sea Stories, which is another veteran-based one. But that one they eat crayons on because it's all Marines. So welcome to Lessons in Leadership, Band of Brothers, Bennett Tanton. How you doing, buddy?
I'm eating crayons, brother.
Are you? Or which color are you on right now?
I'm a purple right now.
All right. It says violet on those, doesn't it? Is it Crayola, or did you have to go
Violet?
with the
I don't know. It's the cheap dollar store ones.
Yeah, that's always they never taste as good as the Crayola ones. So, hey, why don't you tell our listeners, since some of these people may not have heard you before, there's going to be a lot of new people that, just like I had to in the first episode, reintroduce everybody to myself, even though it's being released in my time slot. Tell everyone a little bit about not just your podcasting, but a little bit more like what you are, how you're connected to the military, your veteran status, if you will.
All right. So in 1992, I decided to join the Marine Corps, and I went in open contract and decided that was a good way to get into the military. But so from 92 to 96, after I graduated boot camp, I became a reconnaissance Marine. I went through that whole crapola and got out in 96. Then I floundered around as a civilian for about a year and a half and decided it sucked. And I went back into the Marine. Well, I went back and talked to the Marine recruiter. They're like, yeah, we can put you in, but we're going to take rank. So I was like, the hell you are. I then walked right across the hall and joined the Army, and spent the next 6 years as part of the 10th Mountain Division as a U.S. Army infantryman, and got out in 2003. Deployed a couple different places, but never to Iraq or Afghanistan. And that's about it, man.
Pretty good. I mean, better than most. I mean, both services. So
yeah,
keeping it real. I know that we're doing a show about airborne infantry in the Army, but I understand being someone who wanted to be a Marine and ended up joining the Army instead. I understand what the answer is going to be, or maybe I don't. Well, which service did you enjoy better? I get it to you. I put you right in the spot, man.
I was a Marine in the Army.
Yeah, that's what I hear most guys say. I was in group as a Green Beret with guys who were there that used to be Marines, and they always claim that they were a Marine who went into the Army to be a Green Beret.
Right, still Marine.
Always a Marine. Yeah,
I knew a couple of those guys.
Yeah,
maybe not the guys that served with you, but there was like 3 or 4 guys that actually got out of the Marines and like re-enlisted. They were enlisted in the Army like the next day, a few different times.
Oh yeah, I know a couple of those guys too.
Yeah, so it's pretty funny.
I knew one guy was getting ready to get out of the Army and go enlist into the Navy to go try to be a SEAL. After that, he was recon, then a Green Beret, and then he was like, "I'm gonna go try to be a SEAL."
That kind of crazy shit happens.
I know. I don't know what those guys were thinking.
It's like the Marine Corps at that time was kind of limited special operations wise, so like force reconnaissance was about as good as it got, and even that was a little different. And it wasn't a time of war, so people get a little antsy, and we didn't have the missions like the Green Berets and the SEALs had. So a lot of guys got out and went, to do actual real world stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, so, I understand completely what you're talking about. I got in 95, spent the first 10 years of the Army in that same military that you were in, where,
twiddling your thumbs.
No war going on. Everybody, I mean, regulation up and down. Everything is not loose and fast, man. Everything is high and tight. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I was lucky enough during my Marine Corps time that we deployed to as part of like JTF-6, did drug interdiction work, and some things like that. So it kept us busy. So it wasn't completely uneventful. So right. that was kind of cool.
So you're obviously seen Band of Brothers yourself.
Oh yeah.
As I tell everybody, there's nobody coming on the show who is not a fan and have watched it multiple times. Did you find as you got older or as you got more experience that the show and the lessons that you learned and the things you saw changed for you as time went on? You kind of identified more with different characters or saw different things that you didn't see the first time you saw it?
Yeah, for sure. Because I can't remember what year did it come out exactly.
It came out in 2001. It was released a week. The first episode was released a week later. 9/11 happened.
Right. So yes, I remember watching it the first time and just being in like a daze because it was so good.
Right.
That you couldn't take everything in. It was. I learned way more the second, third, and I think I've watched them all, like binge watch them.
Yeah. I can't do it any other way.
Like 4 or 5 times total. One of which was just like last month. I watched, actually I'm not all the way through it. I watched like 5 episodes. So I ended actually on this episode.
Oh, that's perfect.
Or no, it was the episode before that. So the fourth episode, sorry. But either way, it was, I would agree. I'm definitely learning and seeing, oh man, like you see it when, it's huge difference between when you're like a private and when you're like a sergeant. You know what I mean? You just, and once you've been through the schooling and everything else, you look at it totally different. So I would agree with that. And then being a civilian for a while too, you're like, holy shit. Just like the lessons learned are pretty deep, truly.
All right. Well, let's get into the actual episode itself. And guys, for those of you listening, this episode specifically is being done a little bit different than the other ones. We do not have a character focus. like we do with the other shows, because this character focus is point of view from Dick Winters himself, and we've already spoken as him as a character, got all his information in the first episode, back with Sam Culper from Breakers Podcast was on, and we talked about the background, the history, and who Dick Winters was, and we've heard about Dick Winters all the way up to this. Well, this episode is done from his point of view, but not with any kind of teleplay. He's not speaking over anything. It's all just like you're almost like in his head, seeing it through his eyes. And the episode is called Crossroads, and what I want to do with this episode was different because I don't think people understand that Crossroads isn't just this is the middle episode of the season, the crossroads of the journey of the Easy Company men, but there was an actual battle called the Battle of Crossroads that occurred, that in this episode he is flashing back to. So in real time in the episode, he is not at the Battle of Crossroads, but the Battle of Crossroads is what the episode is about. That may sound a little confusing to you, but if you've seen the show, you'll understand what I'm saying. If you haven't, you'll hear this show, listen to it, then you go watch the episode. Everything will make perfect sense. Does that sound about right, Bennett?
If you haven't seen it, shame on you. But anyway,
well, yeah,
no judgment. No judgment.
No, well, judge free zone, but just shame. Shame. Ding, shame. So, historical breakdown of the Battle of Crossroads. Me and my friend Bennett are going to go back and forth like we do, and we'll talk you guys through this, and then we're going to go into how the episode lays out so that you guys already understand what the episode is talking about with the Battle of Crossroads. And I think a lot of people don't get some of the things in the show because they don't understand that there's parts of the battle that aren't shown, and it makes a little bit more sense when you kind of know it. It's October 2nd, 1944. The 101st Airborne has completed its task on Hell's Highway around Velkak and Eindhoven. It has been moved by truck to the island. This is an area between the Wall River, near Nijmegen, you hear them talk about that in the last episode, and the Rhine River, which is where they're pushing towards. It's cut off on all sides by rivers and canals, hence the name. The island is now in a low-lying, what's called a polderland. It's a crisscrossing of drainage ditches and bordered by like high dikes and rivers. And the crossroads you hear about, Battle Crossroads, is this crossroads of these dikes and drainage ditches. On the northern bank of the Rhine is the high ground overlooking the island. After the 1st Airborne Division withdrew from Osterbeek area, which is now firmly in German hands, so there's a lot of back and forth going on between these units at the time. The Germans have a lot of artillery and mortars with a good supply of hidden ammunition and woods on the heights. They can see every move the Allies make and are keeping them under consistent shelling. And with the aid of aerial photographs taken on September 6th before Market Garden started, we're going to follow Easy Company in the Battle of the Crossroads. And these photographs that I'm talking about, they are actually going to be linked on the show notes page. So you can actually pull the show notes page up if you're listening to the show and look through it, or you can go back to the show notes page, go to the website that's got all these aerial pictures, and you'll be able to follow it afterwards. As the 101st settled on the island, the 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment was assigned to the left side of the island defenses. They relieved this British 43rd Wessex Division in place. By then, the 506 had already lost 40 officers, 293 enlisted men, and were fighting along what was called Hell's Highway. There were now 119 officers and 1,800 men left in the regiment as a whole. The whole regiment, that's all that was left. The 2nd Battalion was in position in the area around this place called Randwalk. So Dick Winters set up his Easy Company command post at Randwalk near houses at what was called Blue 1, which was a phase line. And for those of you who know who tactics and battle plans, everything moves in phases. So Blue 1 was considered the phase line that he was at. Having too much ground to cover with too few men, he was forced to outpost the lines. They maintained contact with patrols, runners, and radio. So they had to use every single means of communication they had at the time. And it's not like it is modern day where everyone was able to make commo with these high-tech SATCOMs. You're talking about wires that are running to these guys who have these like phones that they have to spin up and all these different types of really antiquated.
Yeah. I actually remember those.
Remember you say take these wires and hand them to a private, and then you'd spin the wheel and the charge would shock the shit out of the private.
Right.
So with all that spread out, it left plenty of unguarded territories, and it gave the Germans opportunities to infiltrate, which is exactly what they did. On October 5th, the Germans prepared a massive counterattack with the aim to retake the island and the bridge at Nijmegen. The main assault would be focused on the town of Osviedt, which is on the left side of the Randwalk and is not on the aerial photograph if you look at it. There they planned to break through and push the Americans all the way to the island. Part of the plan was a diversionary attack by SS troops on the American flank. Now, it's hard to understand the American flank because there really wasn't flank if you want to look at like a mountain range. That's what the line looked like. So they were flanking one of those jutting portions of the line that the actual 506 was in. They crossed the Rhine River on the night of October 4th and 5th, 4th going into 5th, at the ferry crossing at what was called Red 1, and assembled on the fields around what was called Red 2. They would move behind the American lines from there and cause as much chaos as they could. This is where Easy Company was to run into them and where the Crossroads battle took place. I'm going to let Bennett go ahead and talk a little bit about that early morning October 5th stuff.
At 0330, October 5th, 1944, Winters set out a patrol to occupy a building on the south bank of the Rhine, marked Blue 2. That's on the map, right? So Sergeant Yeoman took 4 men with him on patrol. Privates Ali, listen, I can never say his name.
Lenizowitz.
Oh,
no, that's not even Lenizowitz.
No.
Lenowski.
Lenowski.
Hey, if there's family members of Lenowski out there right now,
Lesnowski.
we are so sorry.
Lesnowski. Lenowski. You could say it a couple different ways. Liebgott and Stroll.
Liebgott is the Jewish interpreter.
Right. Liebgott, right. And Stroll. They were to keep an eye on the south bank and report back any enemy movement. They made their way across the dikes on the south side, I assume. When they got near the Crossroads Red 1, Sergeant Yeoman ordered Lewinsky. I'm saying Lewinsky.
Why don't we just call him Ski like we would do in the military?
Ski, there we go.
I mean, every guy, for those of you who aren't in the military, every time we ran into a Polish person's last name, they were Ski.
Ski to climb to the top of the dike. He carefully made it to the top where he noticed the outline of a German machine gun with a German soldier standing behind it ready to throw a hand grenade. Ski scrambled down the dike, warning the others as more grenades were thrown at them. All of them were hit by shrapnel, with Ali taking the most damage. He received 32 wounds, on his left face, neck, and arm. Shrapnel disabled the radio on Stroll's back. Disabled the radio on his back, so they could not radio in, but had to move all the way back to Easy Company CP. There, they reported back at 0420, and Winters immediately organized a patrol to investigate this German penetration of their lines. So then Winters takes Sergeant Boyle of Company HQ with a radio and 1 squad from 1st Platoon with him. Starting off at Blue 1, they moved as quickly as they could to the German position Red 1, while the Germans fired intermittently to the south. This puzzled Winters, as there was nobody there. The nearest American was supposed to be was 2nd Battalion headquarters, which was 3/4 of a mile down in the village of Hemmen. They got to point Blue 2, and Winters halts the patrol and tries to call in artillery support. Not being able to raise the FO on the, there we go, the FO on the radio, Winters decides to take a look himself to see how they could get closer to the Crossroads without being seen. He climbs onto and over a dike, spotting a ditch, orange line, right? Yep. That ran parallel to the dikes. This would provide some cover. So then they left 2 men at Blue 2 to guard the rear and right flank, and he took the rest of the patrol over the dike and into the ditch. They moved along the ditch towards the Crossroads at Red 1. Winters halted the patrol again, crawled alone the last 250 yards to a culvert going under the road at the end of the orange line. So do you want to describe what the orange line means?
So each one of the lines, guys, so you have the phase lines where the entire area was broken down into colors. You had orange line, red line, blue line. The blue lines and the orange lines. The blue line was the good guys. Green, blue were good. Orange and red were the Nazis, and they would use kind of like the colors as you would indicating heat, or just standard colors that people associate with good guy, bad guy. Right. Blue forces, red forces. So that's kind of what. So when you hear the color, you think about the colors in succession. Anything in red is going to be considered in Nazi control. Anything blue is going to be in American or Allied control, and then the colors, the green and the oranges are in contested zones.
Right. Now, I always looked at it as like the hotter the color got, the more action there would be. Like
Right.
if you were walking that way, that's the best way.
Kind of like a danger. It's like a danger level.
Danger.
So, yeah.
So at the end of that orange line, going under the road, he counted 7 Germans at the machine gun and crawled back to the patrol and informed them of what he just saw.
Yeah, and this stuff, we go into the episode, this will be something that was actually shown when he does this. But with daylight fast approaching, there was no time for him to waste at all. Winters orders the patrol forward and then quietly as they could to keep low but to hurry. And guys, for those of you who've been in command of patrols and in combat, this is one of those things where violence of action, he has to get there quickly before they get a good hold on the area that they already own. So you got guys who are infiltrating your area. They're not really sure what's going on. While that confusion, that not knowing what's going on, you got to hit them hard right then before they can get dug in, so to speak. And they move forward to a point near Blue 2. So it's another line that is in the not so bad area, or wasn't by their rules at the time. So there shouldn't have been any Germans.
In theory, it wasn't a bad.
Yeah, in theory, there should be no Germans near Blue. But that's why there was such a rush to get these guys in there. Dick Winters instructs a man named Sergeant Dukeman and Corporal Christensen. Corporal Christensen is the character in the show that is played by Michael Fassbender, to set up their machine guns. He went to each man and assigned him a target and told him to hold fire until he gave the command. He stepped back and said, almost whispering, "Ready, aim, fire." All fired at the same time. 4 Germans went down immediately, and 3 others tried to make it towards the other side of the dike, and everybody fired on them, killing them. So I'm going to assume, because I wasn't on the ground there, that this is fairly close for them to be that accurate and get every single one of them.
At night.
Yeah, like right before, in the darkest part of the night, right before daybreak.
Yep.
So in the book, it said that a 60 millimeter mortar that was manned by Muck and Bacala were set up behind the American machine gun, and that it fires on the German machine guns, scoring a direct hit. In Dick Winters' memoirs, Beyond Band of Brothers, he does not mention this at all. And just because he doesn't mention it doesn't mean it's not accurate. A lot of what Stephen Ambrose did was he went and he did oral history with everybody, and he wouldn't put anything in the book. According to what historical record, he never put anything in the book that wasn't verified by multiple sources. So just because Dick Winters doesn't recall this, doesn't mean it didn't actually happen. The patrol starts to receive small arm fire from the road, and it pulls back behind the yellow line in the ditch that runs from the dike towards the river. They take cover, and Winters calls back to his company CP and orders Lieutenant Welsh to send the rest of the 1st Platoon and section of light machine guns from the HQ company. I don't know why they didn't already have them, but I know he'd been out there fast, but I would have. One of the things, this is one of the few times I ever questioned any of his decisions, because I always wondered why Winters. Yes, I understand he grabbed guys that were right there and left, but he should have grabbed guys right there and left, turned to, Buck Compton wasn't there at the time, but turned to Welsh or Nixon and said, "Get everyone else up, ready to go, and stand by and wait." But he had to call back and get them going, which they were still.
It doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense, but it works out, I guess. The Germans were at least at company strength, while Winters patrolled only was a rifle squad. So those reinforcements were absolutely needed. You can get away with being lucky for a little bit, but you've got to start getting overwhelming firepower and, more forces so you can win by attrition, especially when you're dealing with someone like the Germans.
Otherwise, you just better run.
Yeah. Well, funny you should mention that. As they're waiting for the reinforcements to move up, Sergeant Dukeman stood up to organize his men as they were bunched up too close together, and a rifle grenade, which is a grenade that is stuck into the barrel of a rifle and then fired off. So it's kind of like nowadays you'll see an M4 or an M16 with a grenade launcher underneath it. They didn't have that back then. So what they have these grenades on the end of a stick that would go down the barrel, and they would fire a normal round, and it would just launch this grenade out there. So one of those got fired, and it killed Sergeant Dukeman because it landed right there. And, he gave a sigh, they said, after it hit, and he just slumped forward. So the guy didn't suffer, but it did kill him. Everybody opened up, and they killed the Germans who shot the fatal shot, because apparently they were fairly close and visible too. Winters then moved about 25 yards out into the open field to contemplate the situation they were in. And this is another confusion part to me, as it's described, because I've never decided in a moment where I had to take a breather and get a grip on it to walk out into an open field to do it. I probably would want to just stay behind, but understanding what was going on, he probably needed to get out there to get a look at what was going on out there. So this is the 4 things that they say he saw. He saw the Germans were behind a good solid embankment. They were in a shallow ditch, soon to be broad daylight with no safe route to withdraw. They would be able to outflank them by moving unseen along the south side of the dike, and that there was nothing between the Germans and the 2nd Battalion headquarters at Hemmen. So Winters decided he had no other options than to attack and keep the initiative with Easy Company rather than wait and let Germans come up with a plan. And this is why Dick Winters is a genius. He made a decision to assault a company-sized element with a squad of riflemen.
Crazy town. So, with the arrival of 1st Platoon, Winters organized the men in 3 assault columns that would be supported by light machine guns that would fire in between the groups. So you had Blue 1, 1st Squad, commanded by Lieutenant Peacock. Blue 2, 2nd Squad, commanded by Captain Winters, because Dick was still a captain, right?
Yeah,
so Blue 3, 3rd Squad, commanded by Staff Sergeant Talbert. Then, during the World War II, seldom heard over fixed bayonets was given by Winters. So basically, they didn't say that, very much. I wonder what he felt like, because I remember reading that in his memoirs too, where he was real adamant about the fixed bayonets thing.
Yeah.
Pretty, who knows?
We always talked about in the military that it's the scariest order you ever hear is fixed bayonets, because that means you're going.
Shit's about to get real.
It is about it. I mean, seriously, it is about to be like Braveheart. Like it doesn't even. You're going to be just people on top of each other.
You'll be fighting with an E-tool and a K-pot.
There's a manual on that.
Yep, I know. So the order fixed bayonets was given by Winters. On a smoke signal, the base of machine gun fire commenced, and the 3 columns started to move across the open field towards the Germans. As fast as they could, they ran the 200 to 300 yards to the slightly elevated roads, sometimes tripping over hidden low barbed wire fences. Winters ran faster than the others and arrived at the road first. Talk about leading from the front, right?
Well, we always let the officers get there fast, right?
Right. So at this point, the Band of Brothers episode is deviated from the written version. There was no delayed smoke signal causing the rest of the assault group to wait. So Winters arrived at the road. First, he almost jumped straight over it and found himself face to face with a German sentry. Then, when he turned his head, he saw about 100 German troops. 100. And they were taking cover.
No big deal.
Right. No big whoop. And they were taking the cover to avoid the Americans supporting machine gun fire. So then Winters dove for cover and threw a hand grenade, as did the German. However, Winters forgot to take off the safety tape he had put on to avoid accident, so the grenade did not explode, and for some reason the German's grenade did not explode either. Could you imagine? So Winters, realizing this, quickly got up and shot the sentry at point-blank range from the hip with his M1 Garand.
And that to me is the most popular image of this episode.
Right.
Is that hip shot right into the guy.
Shot. So he then turned right and started firing into the solid mass of Germans. They were being hampered in their movement by heavy overcoats and reacted very slowly.
Yeah, and this, I think, goes back to the old adage, you never move with your winter gear on.
Right, for sure.
It was very cold. It was starting to get cold out. And so the Germans, war's been going on a little bit, and there's a lot left to go, but guys are starting to get a little bit lax. And you see this with the Germans, where they're very confident that they can move, with ease. And I think that's part of the reason why Easy Company was so effective against Germans, was Easy Company just took the initiative over and over again. And they would do things that were just way outside the box, if you will. And this is one of those instances where it paid off. Because Winters still alone by himself after this hip shot, fires 2 whole clips of M1 ammo before diving back to cover. And guys, I don't know if you haven't ever fired an M1 Garand. It's not like a drop a mag and just reload. I mean, this thing pops out, and then you got to. So he fires one, and then he reloads and standing there and fires another one before he dives back to cover himself. He looks around, still sees the 3 groups have not reached the road. Winters puts the 3rd clip and popped up, fired 2 or 3 shots, and got back to cover. Germans started to run away from Winters because, I mean, who wouldn't? This motherfucker is crazy and just killed a bunch of dudes.
Right.
Along the foot of the dike, which was called Red 2. Talbert and his group arrive at the road. Winters orders them to open fire, which I don't know why he had to do that. They should have heard all this firing going on. It sounds like he got there well before them, if all that happened. Winters orders them to open fire. It was a duck shot straight into the backs of the Germans that were still hampered in their movements by the thick, long overcoats. Lieutenant Peacock and his group then arrived, having had trouble to pass the wire fence in the field because he's a lieutenant, I guess. I don't know. The machine guns had moved forward to the road, along with other German company that crossed the dike no more than 100 yards away. They were engaged, and as soon as they joined, the first group being routed as well had opened fire all the way back to the river. So you've got both sides almost completely opened up on each other, and this is the one thing in the show that I don't think you get a full feeling of, is the immense amount of fire that was coming down on both sides at this point. The Germans were retreating, so Winters, as a good officer does, starts trying to call in some artillery support, and they maintained a steady fire during this to try to keep the Germans retreating and pushing them back. A small group of Germans were cut off from the rest. They were hiding in the tall weeds. Webster, one of the other Easy Company characters, called to them to surrender because he spoke German. One by one, 11 Germans come out of the weeds and surrender. Webster then returns them to the road, gets in on the shooting after he secures them there, when he's hit in the leg by a German bullet. Winters wanted to push onto the river to call in additional reinforcements. Going after half battalion of Germans with only 2 platoons was a little bit risky, and a platoon from Fox Company was sent their way to try to help him. Winters began to reorganize his troops. So far, they only suffered 1 man killed and 11 wounded. Nowadays, when you just say only 1 man got killed, people nowadays kind of are like, oh, God, a man died. War back then, guys, was just people were going to die. And you have to accept that people are going to die. So,
lots of people.
Yeah, and so the less the numbers could be, 0 is almost impossible to achieve. 1 is pretty damn good considering the situation they were in. The prisoners were escorted back to battalion by Liebgott, who was ordered to empty his M1 Garand of everything but 1 bullet. And obviously the Germans didn't see it, but when we talk about the episode breakdown, there's a great scene where they talk about that.
Joe, knock it off.
Damn it, what?
You're bleeding.
It's nothing, Cap.
I want you to take these prisoners back to Battalion CP. Get yourself cleaned up.
Sir. Come on, Kraut boys.
Joe?
Yeah.
Drop your ammo.
What?
Drop your ammo.
You kidding me? What are you doing?
Give me your weapon.
Yeah.
You have 1 round. Johnny, how many prisoners do we have? Got 11 right now.
See, because Liebgott was known to be really rough on prisoners, and Winters wanted those guys to arrive safely. So he did that to make sure that Liebgott only had 1 round, and the Germans didn't know it, but Liebgott did. So if Liebgott shot one of them, the other ones would soon realize he only had the 1 round, and they might overpower him. So in those hopes, he told them, here, you get 1 bullet, take these guys back. And he later then checked in with Captain Nixon to make sure all those guys got back to battalion safe, and so that they could be interrogated and squeezed for intel.
And Liebgott didn't execute him.
Yeah.
So the platoon from Fox Company arrived, and after distributing ammunition, Winters explained his plans. They would assault across the open ground by fire and movement. They jumped off. And half of the men were to advance towards the river while the rest set up a base of fire. So after 100 yards, they would halt, set up a base of fire, and the rest would leapfrog across another 100 yards. This was the way that they covered the 600-yard distance to the factory buildings at the river. And when they arrived at the factory, they came under fire right away from the right rear from Red 2 by some 75 Germans. So Winters decided it was better to call it a day and fight. Yeah, no shit, right? And fight again another day. Using the same tactic, they leapfrogged back toward the Crossroads, Blue 2. And as the last group was moving over the dike, they were hit by a tremendous mortar barrage on the Crossroads. And the Germans had zeroed in perfectly.
Yeah, and you got the suns up now so they can see it.
Right.
And when it was almost like it was a baited ambush to get them over that deep in, and so they knew they had to get back, and now they could get back. And the Germans, it's not luck. I really do think that's probably a plan that they had, because the Germans didn't take over Europe by not having tactical advantage.
Right. So before they could move away, they suffered 18 casualties, all wounded. Among them were Sergeant Boyle, the right-hand man of Winters that day. And they had received too many casualties to basically to continue the engagement. So the wounded were evacuated by ambulance, and Winter set up a couple of strong points to guard the crossroads. So ended this battle, and Easy Company was extremely lucky with the poor performance of the Germans, but had done virtually everything right themselves. Well, and if they hadn't, just because of the amount of folks that the Germans had there, they would have got their asses handed to them.
Right. And so we just talked about all that, and I know some of you have seen the show, and you're thinking to yourselves, well, why did they just go line by line and tell us everything? And the reason why is because the battle happens. Let me double check my paperwork. The battle happens like October 5th, 4th and 5th, going into the morning. The reason why we talk about all that first, even though it's in the show, is because the show doesn't open up then. The show starts on October 17th, 1944, in Suderland, Holland. Captain Richard Winters. All right, so just so we get everyone clear, me and Ben are now going to talk about the episode. You have all that information that you knew that we just talked about from the actual battle. That is the historical battle as the military knows it, as it's told, as it's written, as the awards were given out.
Right.
The entire battle, line by line. This is how everything happened. One thing I've always noticed before we go into it was how much more German and U.S. fighting was going on in that battle than you actually see in the show. And so we could talk a little bit about the artistic license taken with it. There's a lot of times in film that they overdo something just to make it Hollywood up, as they would say it. Hollywood this up a little bit, make it a little bit more bigger than. This is one of the few times where they tone it down.
Some creative license.
Yeah, the creative license is to tone it down, because I think the focus of this episode is not on tactically the battle or what happened, but as we go into the show, the word crossroads has numerous meanings. You agree? I think that when you talk about like 75 Germans, I think you don't even see 75 Germans, them fighting 75 Germans.
No.
So,
but obviously I always thought that the title was very clever.
Yeah, it is, because it is the 5th episode of a 10-show series. It is the difference in, according to the synopsis online and the way that it was written, Crossroads is considered the crossroads of being not an amateur, but maybe a new soldier in battle. And this is the crossroads where they start to cross into being this battle-worn, really experienced group of guys. So this is a look at, this is where Winters and all those guys are. You see that at this point, before I think things start to wear on them, this is where they're at their peak as far as their tactical advantage and how good they were. Because this is an amazing feat they did for this. I mean, they really could have got behind them and just tore the whole regiment up. But a rifle squad and Dick Winters completely thwart it, and for the most part take it all on themselves. So again, back to it. The show opens up. It's October 17th, 1944 in Schallendorlach, Holland. Captain Richard Winters is waking up Captain Lewis and Nix Nixon as they've been ordered by the 506 Regiment's headquarters. Nixon doesn't want to wake up. He's laying there happy in his probably hangover status that he was at. So Winters grabs a cup of yellow water and pours it over Nixon, which works. Nixon gets up. He's all pissed off. And then he's like, "This is my own piss, man." He throws his pillow at Winters.
Lou, wake up. They want us back at regiment. Come on, Nix, get up. Let's go. Come on, something's up. Strayer's orders.
Okay, go ahead. I'll be right down.
Let's go. Come on, you got 10 minutes.
Go away.
Come on, big boy. Let's go.
Leave me alone.
Okay.
Oh. God damn it. Oh, that's my own piss, for Christ's sake.
Winters, it's one of the really, because they're friends. These guys are buddies, and it's really a cool scene because it's exactly probably if me and Bennett were deployed together at some point, if he had to wake me up and he threw a cup of water on me, and he knows what I'm talking about. When you deploy somewhere and there is going to be a bottle of what was water, but in the middle of the night became a bottle of piss next to you somewhere. And that was one of the things that I didn't get the humor in, beyond just the fraternal infantile humor, but the humor of that setup of that situation became so much funnier to me post deployments, knowing that I always had a piss bottle next to me.
It's either a piss bottle or a dip bottle, one or the other.
Yeah. They have a good little scene with that. Nixon is saying that they're the only, they go to they're walking to headquarters afterwards. Nixon's saying that they're the only ones that have the Germans on their side of the Rhine River, which is a reference back to the Crossroads battle. Winters is told to give Colonel Sink a full written battle report about how he took a crossroads with the company. Winters goes away to do so, begins to recall the events of the battle, and then you'll start seeing flashbacks from this point back to the battle we just talked about. Now, why is this an important scene? Because back then you never wrote a battle report on a battle that you didn't plan. You might write an after-action review or a contact report or send up a 5 Ws or a tick report. But this was a full-on battle with maneuvering elements that they didn't plan to have. So Winters did this entire battle plan in his head right off the bat, right there. And everyone was pretty impressed with that, as I am, just reading about it and watching it after the fact, how well they executed it, considering there was no rehearsal, there was no briefings, no brief backs, no sand tables, nothing. It was all done perfectly. So now they recall a battle, and you'll see in the flashback they show Private Webster clearing a trench of enemy soldiers who claim to be Polish. And Sergeant John, this is during the battle scene. We talked about how Private Webster got those 11 guys that were in the weeds. They show the scene where he pulls the guys out, and they claim to be Polish and not SS. Sergeant Martin doesn't believe him. Webster gets hit in the foot right at that moment. Also, does this whole big scene where he talks about, "I can't believe I just shot. I can't believe it," or they hit me, and he yells about, "I can't believe they just hit me." The important part here, as far as historically, was the SS guys claiming to be Polish. It's not something that was not happening back then. The German army had started conscripting guys from other countries. They pushed a lot of. They say that this is what they say. There's no actual record of it, but in like written and oral stuff, there's no like official documents. But they say that there was actually like captured Russians and captured Chinese who were on the beaches of Normandy during D-Day, having to defend those positions in German uniforms, and which may have been one of the advantages that the American forces had. That's something they always go into. You see Winters sitting at this typewriter for pretty much most of this episode. They do a lot of these close-up views of his face as you see him contemplating stuff, and then fade in and out of his recollection of the battle. And there's also a scene where he's sent to Paris. That's a scene I wanted to talk about a little bit. Do you think, Bennett, because did you see what I saw in that? He was one of those guys that he didn't want to go anywhere. He didn't want to ever leave Easy Company alone.
No, he didn't want to leave his men. He didn't want to leave anything. He just wanted to be in it.
Right. So they had what they talk in. I think it's in the show. They talk about Colonel Sink or Colonel Sink was somewhere. He was in London to see some Betty Grable or some famous person.
Right.
Some other Colonel Horton was somewhere else, and so they decided. And why it was Nixon, Buck Compton.
Yeah, the other officers.
The other officers all said, "You're going on this R&R." And
because you have to.
You have to. And they
didn't really give him a choice.
Yeah, and you could see, a lot of times in combat, you'll see before somebody else does, before someone sees it in themselves, your buddies are going to see when you're getting to that point. They're so tactically sound, but these guys are riding a razor's edge at this point. You agree?
I would agree.
Yeah.
Big time. I mean, they all want to, any break that they could get would be like, they needed it bad.
So one of the things they show in this thing is they kind of cover a little bit of PTSD in this. He's in Paris, and he is in his complete Class A uniform. You can see he feels out of place. He's at the getting coffee at the coffee shop.
Wicked uncomfortable.
Yeah, and people are just interacting like everything's normal because they've been liberated at that point. But he's just out of whack, and so he's sitting on the metro. They go under a tunnel, and there is this young French boy that is sitting across, and he's like, that back then it's kind of an awkward scene for a young guy to watch. He's like, why is that French boy like staring at him like that? But they were in awe of the American soldiers at the time, and they really appreciated them for liberating them. And so this kid is just like, oh look, there's one of the guys, and he can see it. He's like, there's one of the guys who's actually out there fighting. But Winters looks at him, and as they go through the tunnel, Winters has a flashback to, we talked about the hip shot in the show. Yeah, they did. They show the German SS guy that he kills with the hip shot as being a young boy, like a really young soldier.
Yes.
And then when they're in the tunnel, as the tunnel flashes and you start seeing the light, dark, one of the visions he sees is that kid.
Is that guy, right?
Is the guy he shot. And you could see it kind of gets him. He kind of drones off, gets the 1,000-yard stare, and then he hears somebody calling, saying, "Sir, sir, sir," and he looks up, and it's the French kid letting him know, hey, there's no more stops. It's over.
You're at the end, buddy.
You're at the end. You've probably missed your stop. It's a very limited piece of what happens in the show, but it's very important, I think, to what's building within these guys in episodes to come.
No, I totally agree with you.
So
sorry, I got distracted by one of my damn kids.
So Winters comes back, and now we get to see what you were talking about, where he doesn't want to leave his men. Moose Heilinger is now the new company commander of Easy Company.
Yep.
Winters has been promoted to battalion.
He's like, what?
Yeah, and so he's telling him that he's got this mission to go link up the movement of a bunch of special operations back across the line. The great part about this is he's asking him, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you know this? Do you know this? And Nixon just interrupts him and is like, hey, man, he's the commander. He knows what he's doing. And that whole uncomfortable where he's like, yeah, well, hang tough. And I want to say, because I have not been able to find it anywhere, but do you think he tells him to hang tough because Donnie Wahlberg is in the show?
Donnie Wahlberg. You know, I wouldn't doubt it with the way that the show is written, for sure.
I mean, especially since Mark Wahlberg was the first guy who was initially going to play Dick Winters. Damian Lewis ended up getting the job anyway. If they would have gave Mark Wahlberg the line of "hang tough,"
right,
that would have been perfect. I mean, we would have had.
That would have been really funny.
I could just see, the New Kids in the Block music starts playing. You got Easy Company out there doing a New Kids in the Block, Please Don't Go Girl video. That'd be awesome.
Really funny.
So Easy welcomes back Buck Compton, who was injured in Market Garden. Oh, before that, guys, they show the whole Easy Company links up with the British and they get them back across, and then they're all sitting back at the town in Holland, and they're in the chow hall, and they're all celebrating. Thank you, Easy Company, Currahee, and they do the whole yell. And now Buck Compton comes back, and you see your second indication of PTSD. They're sitting there watching a movie. Dick Winters walks in, sees Buck, and Buck is he looks like a ghost.
Yep.
I mean, and he's not reacting to anybody. They don't mention it any more than that scene because they've got to move on. But it's a real good jump to what's coming later on with Buck Compton. So, and we don't talk ahead so that you guys don't get, but many guys in this company who are going to be emotionally affected long-term by the stuff they see. This was a little bit of it. So they are watching a movie, and the movie they are watching is, I can't remember the name. I'll put it in there later. It's some movie with John Wayne in it, which is,
right.
I know that they show the whole scene where Martin and First Sergeant Carlton Lipton are trying to watch it, and he's in the background. The one guy's in the back behind them saying the line over and over again, and they turn to like, hey, shut the fuck up, man. Which reminded me of every time you had that one annoying private who would always be like, had to say something. Yeah.
Jesus.
I got bad news for everybody. I think I was that guy at some point. I moved on from it, but I was that guy, I'm pretty sure. While they're watching the film, the lights flick on. In comes Horton, tells them all to pack up because the Germans have pushed through the line and have completely engulfed one of the other companies. And this is the step into the second half of the series, but it's made to, you really see the dread on the Easy Company guys' face when they arrive at the demarcation point for the trucks that drove them out there to relieve these guys in place that were attacked, where they're all come walking out of the woods completely like zombies.
Yep.
This is when we first get to see everybody's favorite character, Lieutenant Dyke, who is the new commander, because Moose Heilinger, the one that he had drilled, gets shot in the leg in the episode, or gets shot by friendly fire in the episode while they're walking along the train tracks.
Right.
There's all these little things in there that are just like thrown in that everyone always forgets about. There's the whole scene where Doc Rowe, the medic, is yelling at Dick Winters and Welch because they pretty much gave Moose Heilinger an overdose of morphine. There's all this other stuff, but what's important about this show is they move to the Ardennes Forrest near Bastogne, they demarc, and they see the other company come out. You get all this image of Dyke is complaining about, we don't have enough ammo, and he's like, well, we don't have enough, or no, he says, we don't have enough cold weather gear. Dick Winters is like, Lieutenant, you got bigger problems. You don't have enough ammo either.
Right.
And then up drives Jimmy Fallon in his role. His one little piece he's got. Jimmy Fallon's in this episode. He's talking about everything, and he's trying to help them out by giving them ammo. But overall, this episode to me is more about the Crossroads battle. But those little scenes that are in between are really important to the overall story. Is there anything that you saw in the episode that I didn't cover right there that you want to bring up?
No. But I do I laughed my ass off when Jimmy Fallon pulled up. But I really like the idea, like the little snippets that you talk about is like the first real entrance of like PTSD type symptoms within the guys like Buck and some of the other guys and Dick, and they just kind of, you can see that they're really everybody's starting to get worn down. And if those guys are getting worn down, the rest of them are just like hanging on,
right.
And then going forward, we obviously see other things, but we're not going to talk about that. But
and for
it's kind of like the beginning of it.
Go ahead.
It's just the beginning of that little taste that you get of what's to come.
And for those of you who are staring, yelling at your thing, what about the Carrington episode with Blythe? And that wasn't PTSD. That was, as we talked about, that was just hysterical fear and how he was not too afraid to act. His body was so afraid that even though he was willing to push himself forward, he had that moment where his body blinded him to try to stop him from pushing through. Right. So it's always a misconception, I think, with people who've never seen it, that Blythe wasn't a coward. Blythe wasn't suffering from PTSD. That was a physiological reaction that his body was having, because we talked about Blythe in that episode. But I don't want to have any misconceptions when we and Bennett say that it was the beginning of the showing of some PTSD symptoms. It really is, because you don't see it really before this, even though that one, some people would think that was what that was. Yeah, that's not what that was. That was just that was fear. That was an episode about fear. Really, that's about it.
Yeah, it's a great episode.
It is a great episode.
And, I mean, they're all great, but that one was, I just really liked this. They added, there was a lot in it. That's one of those things. It was sneaky. So, it's really worth another look to like pick out all those little nuances, like you had brought up of some of them. So
if you go back, you watch the scene with Liebgott have Winters taking the ammo from Liebgott, and the look on Liebgott's face, because Winters has to yell at him to get him to stop shooting. All that kind of stuff's great. And like I said, this show feels a little short because we don't have a character development character, but I wanted this show to be more about what historically happened at the Crossroads battle, because that was, like I said, I think that is Easy Company's peak of their tactical expertise. Everything else beyond this is just them enduring and keeping faith in their mission. But they really did just execute the entire Crossroads mission.
Yeah, and just really showing how active leaders lead and really think on the fly. You know what I mean? And not just that, but like the tactical mind of knowing the terrain and what they can use to their advantage and what can be used against them. And just, it was very good maneuvering as well. So
yeah, it really flashes everyone back to
kind of old school. Yeah, I mean,
like infantry training or ranger training, where a bad decision, decision now is, or a bad decision now is better than no decision at all.
Correct.
So it's he gets them up and he gets them
time
moving.
to sit there and think about it. You have to execute. That's it. Right. That's what it's about. So
and then
awesome.
they catch him by surprise.
So cool.
I mean, they catch a force that is moving with a plan.
Yep.
They have no plan, and they're able to push that force back and beat them. So I want to thank you, Bennett, for coming on.
Anytime, brother.
Anytime?
Anytime. Well, and reason.
Yeah, we know. Yeah. Guys, we're gonna catch you guys up next week. I'm gonna let the music is gonna start coming in here. You'll hear my outro stuff with all my little throwbacks to all the people that helped out put this production together. And now when you hear Bennett's name in that part, you'll know who I'm talking about. So thank you, Bennett. Thank you, listeners, for listening. And guys, we'll catch you guys on the next episode of Lessons in Leadership, Band of Brothers.
Lessons in Leadership, Band of Brothers is a production of Changing Hearts and Minds, hosted by Jeff Adamick on the Change Your POV podcast network. You can find other amazing shows on the network by going over to changeyourpov.com. Huge thanks goes out to all the amazing guests featured in the episodes of this series. First, our very own network hosts, Eddie Lazary and Bennett Tanton, hosts of Change Your POV podcast and Attack Friday. Dwayne France, host of Headspace and Timing. Andrew McDowell, host of Neophyte in the Woods. And our newest host, Benjamin Loth, hosting a show releasing soon called Branding with Benjamin. Special thanks goes out to some amazing podcast hosts who have donated their time and opinions to the series. Sam Culper of Breakers Podcast, Brad Taylor of Sofa Kings Podcast, Nick Giglio of Conspiracy Geeks Podcast, and last but certainly not least, to the man who probably had the biggest role in making Band of Brothers the series that it is today, a staple amongst military ranks and revered by all who have worn the uniform. Here's a huge salute to you, Captain Dale Dye. Owner of Warriors Inc., Dale also has a new film in the making and is planning on using veterans to be part of the cast and crew. To learn more about this and to get the links to all of the podcasts and podcast hosts mentioned, head on over to changeyourpov.com/Band of Brothers, all one word. If you like this series, share it with someone you think would like it too. Thanks for listening, and in the words of Dick Winters, I thank God for seeing me through the day of days and prayed I would make it through D+1. I also promised that if some way I could get home again, I would find a nice, peaceful town and spend the rest of my life in peace.